Welcome to High Peaks Home. Today's episode, we're going to talk about stairs in a treehouse, if you will. My friend Julia here has asked me to come over and give her a hand. So she's going to do all the work, and I'm just going to help her along so she can learn the whole process. So, without further ado, the treehouse. All we're going to do is take our elevation from here down to the ground and then figure out what we're going to do. So, first things first, tape measure. Little disclosure. By no means is this structure regulated by code enforcement or anything of that nature. And they'll be perfectly safe, but they're not going to be exactly to the code. So 32 inches is our total rise. Now we're going to land this staircase on a couple of large rocks. And we already measured those. Those are 7 inches tall. And because of the dirt and the leaves and all that, we'll dig down what we have to. So that leaves us with 25 inches. So let me get you in here. Okay, so we have 25 inches. And this calculator can figure everything out to the 16th of an inch. But I want to do it so that you guys can understand the process with just using a standard calculator. So I'm just using just the calculator functions. So we have 25 inches of total rise. So we'll write that down. 25 rise. Now we need to figure out how far out we're going to do for a run. Now typically in a house, you'd already have that planned. But for this, it's whatever we want it to be. So we know that we want to have our treads to be 11 inches. So our tread's going to be 11 inches. Tread. Now, what we can do is we'll use that as a multiplier later. But first, we got to figure out how many steps we're going to go up. And so we'll take 25 and we'll divide that by, let's say, 3. So we'll do 25 divided by 3. That's 8.3 inches. Well, that's too tall. I mean, this is for children, right? So we want to have it smaller than that. So we'll do 25 divided by 4. 6.25. Perfect. So we'll do 6.25 on the rise. Now, 0.25, that's easy enough. That's a 1/4 inch. We all know what that is. So now we have 6.25 for our rise and 11 inches for our tread. And that is it. That's all you need to know to do your stringer layout. So let's go do a stringer layout. All right, so we know our rise and our run. So we have 6.25 as our riser. And we want 11 inch for our tread. So that's our run. So you take your framing square and we're going to put our tread, so our run on this side and our rise on the short side. So you set your framing square right up to the 11 inch. Now I like to use these little step gauges. They're called step gauges. I don't really know why. Because they don't actually gauge anything. All they do is limit the movement of your framing square. So I lightly clamp that in until I set this guy. So you set this one to the 6.25 or 6 1/4. Hold it against your board. Slide her in. Lightly clamp it. Now go back to your 11 inch and verify that's where you want it to be. And you want it right on that 11 inch. Snug them down. Now, I've deemed this end of the board not usable. See if you can see that. So this end of the board to me is not usable. It's got a bunch of cracks. It got a couple big knots here, and I don't want that as my last thread. So I mark that off, and now all I do is trace the outside of my framing square. So what I'll do is I'll have Julia do the rest of them. So here's a common issue, is that you have to stay on the outside scale on both, or be on the inside scale on both. So you're on the outside scale, this 11. So then slide your, yep, perfect.
Sean, you made it look really easy.
Just pick up on it a little bit. Here, let me show you. Yep. You see how the screw goes through? So you've got to get the screw on top of the blade. So you have like so. Then slide her in. And then set it to 6, yep, 6 1/4. Now you don't have to set this piece to 6 1/4. You got to set 6 1/4 to the board. So this will actually stand off just a little bit. And then when you look above, yep, you want to make sure that 6 1/4 is right on it. Happy?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, oh, hold on. You need to get that 11-inch. Oops. You need to get that 11-inch mark right in line with this mark. Yeah, just like that. Yep. And just do that 4 more times, or 3 more times. All right, so we have 1 riser, 2 risers, 3 risers, 4 risers. So go ahead and set your framing square back up on top of this one. Okay, now just do this line here. All right, now we're going to take the framing square, come to this side. It maintains the same angle, but we need to cut off the rest of it. So scribe that line on the inside. Okay, now we do the same thing down on this end. Perfect. So now we have to cut this line here, all these little triangles out, and cut this guy off. No, we're gonna cut all the triangles first. I mean, we can lop this guy off, right? And we can slide it down or bring the soft edge over. Okay. Whatever makes you feel more comfortable. And we'll cut all the triangles out. And then we do the final cut, I'll fold it. Okay. And lob it off. Okay.
So one thing with it, I will like double check, triple check before I do this. I'm cutting this, I'm leaving this, because that's the kind of thing I could see myself cutting the wrong piece.
Oh, I've done it.
Lousy with the saw, Sean, I'm not gonna lie. Not very exact. Good thing we've got lots of material.
Yeah. We'll get it sorted.
Okay.
So I'll show you my technique on cutting. And so I'll cut one of the triangles out.
Okay.
And then let you do the big cuts.
Okay.
So, all right, so when you're cutting your material out, you always want to pay attention to what you're keeping and what you're not keeping, right? Like you just identified. And so we know, pencil. we're going to get rid of this triangle here. And so sometimes I find it helpful, especially when I'm like really tired. I'll go through and I'll make those marks so that when I'm making my cuts, I don't have to think about the workpiece, right? I have to think about the cut, right? And to me, that's really important, having had an accident. So I want to make sure that my blade is right where I want it to be. Let me show you guys a little bit of a close-up of this. If you were to cut the line itself, you would be making this workpiece smaller. So if the blade is on the line or consuming the line, this piece becomes smaller. Or if it's on this side of the line, the workpiece definitely gets smaller. Right? You have to think about the consumption of the blade. The blade consumes an 1/8 inch. Right? So you want to maintain this line on the inside edge of the blade. So while you're cutting, that's what you're looking at, right? You're not paying attention to the other parts of the fence or anything else. You're looking at where it's cutting and how it associates with the line. And the more accurate you are with that, the more consistent you'll be. And your workpiece ends up being mathematically where you want it to be. So I'll go ahead and cut this one, and you can cut the rest. Now, when it comes to cutting, it's all about comfort and how you want to do it. My first reference is the 0 on the front of the fence, and I guess the inside edge of that is mimicking the inside edge of the blade. It's not exact. So I just use that as kind of like a reference point, and I'll slide my saw in so that the consumption side of this notch is to the outside. And then I bring the guard up and I find my line. I rest my blade on the line right where I want it to cut, and then I just pick it up, I pull the trigger, and I drop it in. Now, if you ever lose sight of the line, go ahead and pull back. That's what I did there. Is with as dark as the timber is and as light as the line is, it was hard for me to see, so I just went ahead and pulled it back till I identified it again, and then I started cutting again. And if you ever lose sight of your intersecting line, which I have, yep, it's way over here, I stopped, right? I need to know where that line is at all times, otherwise you're gonna cut through your workpiece. And so I'll go ahead and just darken that up a little bit. And then when the front of the blade comes in contact with that intersecting line, I stop, right? Especially on stair treads or stringers, you do not want to bypass cut, okay? And we'll clean it up with a handsaw afterwards. So that's all you're gonna do. Cut all your lines, and then we'll go back with a handsaw and knock these out. So if it doesn't fall out, don't worry about it. Oh, sorry. Yep, so the safety on this is a push down. Yep.
Thanks.
Never pull the trigger with a wood engaged in the blade. pull back. See how far you are?
Mm-hmm.
So you're paying attention to this mark,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not paying attention to the blade. So all this is just a reference, just to kind of get you started. So when you pull it in, and you have this mark here, then drop the saw in, but while you're dropping the saw in, pay attention to the blade and the wood. When you start aiming it and you start hearing the saw kind of bind in, that's when you want to stop.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm still noticing like you're still looking at this. This is only at the very, very beginning. I'll show you again. So I'll bring it in, and I'll bring it in pretty far, right? I'm already like halfway through the cut. And then I just use it as a pivot point, right? And then I drop my saw. So come look at it on this side. So then I'll drop it right there, right? And then I kind of like lock this finger to the board and pick it up. And then once I'm through, all of my focus, 100% of my focus is right there. Right, that's all I'm looking at, is that tooth and that line that we made. Getting it bound on me. So another thing about cutting stringers is all the tension that's in that board, it's going to be releasing every time you cut. So when it starts bonding like that, just back it off, come back in, and it'll start cutting wherever it decides to change. So I'll show you guys again. So the first thing I do is I look at the 0 and the gap there. I set that to, well, in this case, it's going to be the outside of the gap because I'm keeping this piece. I'm getting rid of this piece. So I want that to the inside or the outside of the fence. Then I pick it up. I rest my blade right to the inside of my cut line. Pick it back up, pull the trigger, and then drop the saw in gently. Now, 100% of my focus is right there, right where the line is meeting the tooth. And then I stop where the other cut line is. Once we have the 7-inch rock right there. There she is.
Yeah.
Sweet. And because we have, only a 6 1/4 rise, that means our plumb cut is, the same. And so our intersecting face doesn't have to be as big. So it works out even better. That's gonna work out slick. Now, The only question we have is, how wide of a staircase do you want? So just 2 stringers? Copy that. Rinse, lather, and repeat.
That's why we check.
Yeah.
So for this, do we want to remeasure? Do we want to trace what we've got?
Just trace.
Okay.
If you and I were on a production job, we'd do it again.
Yep.
It's fine. But for what it is, it's fine. I've worked with carpenters who've been doing it for 20 years. They can't do it this well. Okay, so don't beat yourself up at all on this. It's just, you don't do it for a living. And you did great for not having done it for a living. So, like my hands, they're calculated to this whole process, right?
Your pencil's right there. If that's what you're.
Nope. For my speed square.
Oh. It's right there.
Aha. So, when I'm sitting here, this thing. When I'm gonna go ahead and trace one of these, I'm just doing this number, and I can feel that this one is proud of the board. So I'm gonna bring it in, and now I can feel that it's right. If you don't have that feel already calculated in, you can just do this and butt it up, and simple. Now, with that said, you actually don't want to plumb up the backside. The backside can have differences in it. It has 0 implications towards the tread, right? So you have to line up that and see how it moved.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even in dimensional lumber, it'll have variance in it. It's not perfect, it's not metal, right? So we want to plumb it up, or flush it up rather. And I typically will just do the top and the bottom. Now with that said, if I look down it and I see a big difference here, in like say I'm doing a 14-step rise, right? What I'll do then is I'll pull this board off and I'll verify where the crown is. And the crown is what's messing with you. So with such a short run, the crown's not gonna impact. Unless you're doing rough cut lumber and it's all over the place anyway.
Right.
So that's where I want it. Now I left a little extra meat down here so we can clean that up. And then we're all set. So we know that the last cut we did, doing a single line wasn't dark enough for us. So we'll just go ahead and really mark it out. As a carpenter, pencils are free. So now, when it comes to cutting, you're gonna be consuming the pencil lines.
Okay.
All right, every time, because now you know this piece lives on the inside of what we just marked out. So consuming that line is where you want to be. So you want the inside of that blade to be to the inside of that line. And then that's your precision cut. Now, I'm just making that to make it easier on me. That's already easy, so we're all set there. It's hot in the sun. On our first stringer, we had the cut go fully length there. All we did, we took a tape measure You measure to 11. Right, put a little tick mark. Then you take your speed square, line in your tick mark, put your line in, and now you have your 11-inch tread and your plumb cut intersecting the deck. Now, to finish out these little triangles, grab you the handsaw. Thank you. All I do is I'll put pressure on one of the edges, opening the gap up. That drops my handsaw in. And that sometimes happens. Then I put a finger on the blade because I'm trying to keep it flush with this surface. And then I'll go in and I'll clean the nugget up. Okay. Stringers. Now what I want to do is I want to clean up the face a little bit. So just some sandpaper. So I'm always buying these discs for my orbital sander, right? And so I always have them around, and there's a lot of hand sanding that needs to happen. And so I picked up one of these little foam holders with the Velcro on it, and it just makes it so much easier when you're doing hand sanding. Then you don't have to have hand sandpaper around and, you know, cutting it to the little block and all that crap. It just sticks on there. And all I'm trying to do is just clean up the surface because we're gonna tape this. I guess it's something else I should show. Like this board, we have no idea how long it's been around. It has a fair bit of discoloration on it. And so from the very first cut, I paid attention to the wood grain and how bright it was, right? So if we know that the discoloration fed into the wood, we wouldn't be using the board. Like we already know it's on a decline. But if it's just discolor on the surface, it's fine. I'm not looking to make all this smooth. I'm just making a contact area where our tape is gonna go. So if you want to sand out the other one, so, right, the stringer sits like so, right? And when the rain comes in, you'll have two boards here. And the rain's gonna come in between those two boards and sit right there. And so your stringers always rot out right there, or on a leading edge, whatever, wherever the rain can get to, and especially like snow back here will rot your crux out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tape this whole surface with a flashing tape. And you can use really any flashing tape out there. I just happen to use Zip because I buy it by the case. And I do this detail like on all my decks, like the deck joists, everything that has a vertical surface that the rain can or snow can hit on. It's such a cheap insurance. It's not cheap tape, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than rebuilding a deck. I screwed up, and let me show you how. When we cut all of our rises and runs, it's all cut to 6 1/4 inches. Now that's your total rise that you're looking for. And what you have to think about is what are you putting on here, right? The tread. This guy sits there like that. So if this sits there, and you don't modify this first section of the stringer, that's gonna be a hard edit. Now, we're at 7 1/4 inches. Well, you can't have one step be 7 1/4 and then the next be 6 1/4 and so on and so forth. So what you have to do is you have to cut the thickness of your tread, whatever you're using, off of the bottom of your stringer. So we're gonna cut 1 inch off the bottom of both stringers, and then we'll be ready to start sorting out the rest. All right, we're ready to start installing the stringers. And what we need to do is establish basically a footing for the stringers to land on. Now I know this isn't poured concrete and I can't fix myself to these things, but that's fine. It's a treehouse. It'll be fine. What I'm gonna do is add bracing to shore it all up so she doesn't bounce around or anything like that. And all you have to do is once you get this so that your tread lands level where you want it, you come in from behind this rim joist here and you just put in a couple of lag screws. Now I prefer to use the Fasten Master timber lock, or not timber lock, headlock, because it has a large head surface, so it really draws it in tight. And they're thinner shanked, so you're not worried about blowing out the sides of the lumber that you're using for your stringers. Just my suggestion, it's what I like to use, and I have a bunch of them on the trailer, so it works. So I will show you how we're going to attach this. All it's going to do is sit on the rock there. Now we decided, rather the homeowner decided, that she wants it 28 inches apart. So we cut that block to 28 inches. So we're going to set this guy just like so. And then we'll set this to 28 inches. So I'll put a little tick mark at 28 inches. Then I'll have Julia hold it for me, and I'll go ahead and screw it in from the back side. All right, so what I like to do is I'll take my screw, I'll set it in the center of the board we're coming to, and I'll just kind of work it out to where I want it, which is, I would say, above an inch, inch and a half above the lower edge. And then I'll just set it there. Now I'll make a little tick mark there while I get myself situated. Oops, wrong bit. Okay. Scoot it. The bottom of it is twisted. There you go. All right, and then I'll put another one up here and we'll be all set. There we go. Tight. Yeah.
You said about an inch down?
Yeah, you want to have some meat there, because if you go too high up, you'll blow the top up, right?
Yep. Yep.
And we'll pay attention to these. Are pretty thin, so it shouldn't be a problem, but it might split the end of this, and if it does, we'll pre-drill the rest of them. All right. That's pretty good, actually. I would like to see some diagonal bracing though, I think still. All right. That's what I want.
with the wood. Gosh. Hilarious. You're freaking hilarious, Sean.
I tried. That keeps it from scissoring. Not like it would anyway.
Alright. This is solid.
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 Not going anywhere. So we got tread material up there. So we know it's 28 plus 3 is 31. Throw an inch on the outside of that. 33. Inch on either side.
Yeah, 33.
Yep. So we'll cut a pile of those, 33.
Okay.
And so that should be 8 of them. Okay, so we're ready to start installing the actual treads. And we had to do a little bit of custom milling, because this board here overlaps the top of the stringer about yay far. So when you set your board on, and the second one on, now you can see that there's this big nosing here. And we don't want a big nosing here. We don't want kids come up here and tripping on it. So went ahead and just milled the board down. So now it'll be nice and flush and it'll be all set. Now, one thing I did add is when you mill a board, you have a really sharp edge, like this edge here, right? It's a nice square edge. So I took the router, put a nice little chamfer on there, and it's all good. Now to install them, what we want to do is you want to have a bit of a gap here. So you want to, and like an 1/8 inch gap. So I'll use my speed square, set it in there, and that'll create the gap. And then you also want to take a block. So we did a 1 inch overhang on both sides. So this is a 1 inch block. You set your 1 inch block there, and then you bring your board to the edge of it, and now it's perfectly spaced. Now you don't have to worry about tape measures. Well, there you have it, everyone. We built a set of stairs in the middle of the woods, and it's not to code, I know, but it's super solid. It's not going anywhere. It's gonna outlast this treehouse, no doubt. And it didn't take a ton of tooling. If you just follow the steps that we've laid out for you guys, it should be pretty easy. If you run into a snag, put a comment down below and I'd love to walk you through it. So, Julia.
Thank you, Sean.
What did you feel you learned from doing this?
So there are a couple things that I felt like I really took away from today. One, I feel like I know how to lay out a set of stairs, which I didn't know before. And two, I feel so much more confident in cutting.
Perfect.
With my circular saw.
What would you say is different from the way you were cutting before today?
One, I wasn't looking at the blade, I was looking at the guard. And the other thing is that I definitely wasn't starting the saw with the blade pretty much ready to cut into the wood. I was starting it kind of way back with the guard on the line. Okay,
super. And you found that to be easier?
So much easier. So
Perfect.
Much easier, gives us so much a cleaner cut.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, all right, everyone. If you have any questions, please ask. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your own projects.
Ba, ba,